Hey everyone, this is Mr. Michelson. As you can see, I am not here today, but I want to make sure things go very smoothly and that you are respectful to whoever's here in my place today. So please make sure that class goes as normally as possible. Last class, we finished up with our Step from Heaven slash culture unit, and today that means we're starting out with a new unit. So I know it's a little weird for me not to be here to start out a unit with you, but we'll do the best we can here with our next unit, which is on, as you can see, poetry. We'll be taking this unit right into winter break, and so that'll be the next few weeks of class focused pretty much on poetry. For this unit, our essential questions are: how does poetry contribute to our understanding of self, others, and the world? And how and why do poets use figurative language, which is something we've already mentioned a few class periods ago. So, to get us started, our learning targets today, you're going to talk and show what you know about figurative language, first of all. We'll do a little pre-assessment in a few minutes. And you can include sensory details in your creative writing. We worked on that with our mystery unit, of course, but we're also going to work on that in a different way here with poetry. So those are some learning targets we'll begin to focus on today. We're going to read a lot of poems over the next few weeks. And as we read some of those poems, we're going to go through what I call reading and perceiving them. So looking at a poem, reading it, maybe reading it once or twice or even 3 times, and then thinking about it, looking for what we can say about it, looking for what sticks out to us about it. And we'll use these questions on the screen to help us do that. We're going to get some practice with this in just a sec. So the first question is, what do you notice about a poem? What kind of things jump out at you? What sort of things are really noticeable as you read? Choose a line from the poem and explain why you like it. Find maybe just 1 or even 2 lines of poetry and, hey, I like this. Tell why. Talk about why. We've talked a little bit about mood this year. Mood is definitely something we see a lot in poetry. We're going to try to think about mood as we read poems. So what is the mood of the poem? And how can you make any connections to the poem? Maybe it's a text to self connection. Maybe you've read things that remind you of what you just read in a poem. Or perhaps you even have some text to world connections where you can think about things in the world that relate to the poem that you're reading. What is this poem about is a good question. A lot to explore there as we look at different poems. And then what questions do you have about the poem? Or I might even ask, what questions would I ask the poet after I've read a poem? What do I still want to know? We're going to use these questions quite a bit. That's why I'm taking a few minutes here to go through them. And we're going to start today with a poem by a man named Langston Hughes. He was a pretty well-known American poet. I'm sure this will not be the last time that you hear Langston Hughes in your language arts class. He lived from 1902 to 1967, and he wrote a lot about Black life in America from the 1920s to the 1960s. So he's really known as a great writer in Black history. And an important part of what we call the Harlem Renaissance. So this was a time in America when there was a lot of good art coming from this part of New York called Harlem. And he was a big part of what they call this Harlem Renaissance. So if you've ever heard that term, he's a big name in that. The poem we're going to read here, I'll read it to you really, is called Mother to Son. As we look at this, we'll also be doing some of that read and perceive work. Mother to Son by Langston Hughes. Well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it, and splinters, and boards torn up, and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time, I's been a climbing on, and reaching landings and turning corners, and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So, boy, don't you turn back. Don't you set down on the steps 'cause you finds it kinder hard. Don't you fall now, for I's still going, honey. I's still climbing, and life for me ain't been no crystal stair. So with this poem, I want you to think about those 6 questions. We're going to do that in our writer's notebook. Feel free to read the poem again. Feel free to answer as many of these questions as you think you can in the time that we give you. And Then we'll have a chance maybe to just talk a little bit about it. Just get some practice with reading and perceiving.